An eerie calm descends over the streets of Noumea as locals wake to a city they don't recognize.
Maintenant, les jeunes se rebellent. La Nouvelle-Calédonie va mal, quoi. Nous, on n'a pas dormi depuis avant-hier. On n'a pas dormi de peur que les gens tirent sur les gens dans notre quartier.
As fires continue to burn, emergency responders assess the night's damage, while others keep watch.
Écoutez, nous on est là simplement pour sécuriser notre quartier, notre maison.
For the first time in 3 decades, a long-standing peace has ruptured. As protests against proposed changes to the French territory's electoral roll turned violent.
Je sais pas, il y a des jeunes qui nous ont caillassés, moi et puis mes parents. Du coup, on a repris la route et tout le long de la...
For days, chaos has reigned. Dozens of businesses have been destroyed, nearly 100 police officers have been injured, and at least 4 people have been killed. Some residents have set up defensive barricades, but there's also fears some are taking justice into their own hands.
Même moi, je vous avoue, je suis avec mon arme tout le temps pour parvenir à quelconque situation.
A curfew has been ordered and reinforcements sent from Paris to try and restore order.
Je travaille ici. Resto, je fais de la pizza. Grâce à ça que moi j'ai un loyer, j'ai quelque chose à la maison. Là, il y a un enfant pour moi.
So, what are the proposed changes that have sparked this wave of unrest? France's parliament is considering whether to allow thousands of mostly French-born New Caledonian residents to vote in local elections, a move many Kanak say is being rushed through without consultation.
Mais nous, on a le fait que c'est des gens à 22 000 km qui débarquent et puis qu'ils insistent sur le droit de vote.
New Caledonia's indigenous Kanaks make up about half the territory's population, and many want to secede from France. After unrest in the 1980s, a series of referendums on the territory's sovereignty held legitimacy with both sides, until a final vote in 2021, when the French government denied a request to postpone during the pandemic, leading pro-independence voters to boycott and a landslide vote to remain French. But pro-independence leaders have never accepted the result, and since then, negotiations on a way forward have ground to a halt, with the issue of independence for many unresolved. As Noumea burned, lawmakers in Paris met to vote on the proposed electoral reforms.
Ne vous inscrivez pas dans un processus de colonisation qui consiste à mettre en minorité un peuple sur sa propre terre.
The bill eventually passed 351 votes to 153. Prime Minister Gabriel Attal urged calm.
En Nouvelle-Calédonie, on connaît le lourd tribut de la violence.
Now President Macron has called for talks to be held in Paris with New Caledonia's leaders before a final vote in a joint sitting of both parliamentary chambers in coming months.
The key thing is that independence leaders want it looked at in New Caledonia, around a table, led by a dialogue mission. They no longer trust the senior leaders in France to conduct talks in Paris. They want them in New Caledonia.
Back in Noumea, independence groups and politicians have also called for the violence to end.
On ne peut pas se mettre tout d'un coup à détruire ce qu'on a construit difficilement depuis 1988 dans des conditions de paix qu'il a fallu.
La violence, non, mais d'une autre façon. Mais s'il faut que ça pète un bon moment, il faut que ça pète. Parce qu'en face, ils font les sourds. Parce qu'il y a eu des signes depuis qu'on a montré, toujours pacifiquement. Ils n'ont jamais tenu compte de tout ce qu'on a fait jusqu'à là.
The political impasse comes amid a worsening economic crisis, with the territory's vital nickel industry on the brink and an increasingly restless youth population starved of work and opportunities.
Les jeunes cherchent du travail, ils n'arrivent pas à trouver. Le gouvernement, ils ne font rien pour eux. Et voilà ce qui arrive.
But those making trouble are the minority. Most people here just want to live in peace.
Il n'y a pas de politique dedans ma pizza, tu vois. Moi, je nourris des Blancs, je nourris des Kanaks, je nourris des Chinois, tu vois. Là, on n'a plus rien. Enfin, comment?
Now, a few weeks ago, we spoke with pro-independence politician Patricia Gore. Now, she told us about the growing frustration among Kanaks about France's unilateral push to amend voting laws and a lack of dialogue with independence leaders. Now, to unpack what happens from here, I'm joined by long-time New Caledonia watcher and island business correspondent Nic Maclellan. Thank you for joining us, Nic. Now, I'm just going to get straight into it because these voting role changes, they were a tactic to force both pro-independence and loyalist leaders back to the negotiating table. But what has gone so wrong?
The key leaders of the independence movement have been calling for a comprehensive agreement to replace the Noumea Accord. This was a framework agreement that's lasted for 25 years. One of the elements of that is to allow more long-term residents to become New Caledonian citizens, and they have the right to vote for New Caledonia's provincial assembly and Congress. But France is acting on this as a unilateral initiative just on the electoral reform without addressing other key concerns like really having a pathway towards a new political status, indeed an independent and sovereign nation. And we've seen massive turmoil in New Caledonia in recent days because France has moved ahead with adding another 25,000 people to the electoral rolls without addressing other long-standing concerns.
Now, French President Emmanuel Macron's declaration of a state of emergency has given sweeping powers to the state to arrest and detain people, as well as banned apps like TikTok to stop spreading any information, in fact. Now, what impact do you think that will have on the ground?
It's a very worrying sign. It's the first time in 40 years since France has declared a state of emergency in New Caledonia under French law. The last time was in December 1984, the beginning of the armed conflict that divided the country in the mid-80s. These rules and regulations give enormous power to the French authorities. Obviously, political leaders and the police are concerned to end the rioting and looting that's occurred, particularly overnight, despite curfews. But there's growing concern amongst Kanak politicians and many community groups that the core underlying problems of poverty, of disadvantage and so on can't be addressed simply by policing. Already the French Overseas Minister has announced the house arrest of 5 so-called radical leaders from the Kanak movement. France has brought in hundreds of Garmobile, of riot police, specialist police units and so on. But the political problems can't be solved at the point of a gun.
Yeah. Now, we've heard a lot from people, and there's lots more to this escalation than just the vote in the French Parliament. How do you think New Caledonia's broader economic and social issues have played into this unrest?
It's been a difficult year for the people of New Caledonia in terms of the economy, jobs and livelihoods. One of the key industries is the nickel sector, both the mining and smelting of nickel ore. New Caledonia has really large reserves of this strategic metal, but they've been hit hard by rising energy costs, by competition from Chinese companies in Indonesia, and generally there's a real crisis in this key economic sector. The government under President Louis Mapou has been trying to bring in progressive tax reform to increase taxes on business houses and the wealthy, and that's been firmly resisted by wealthy members of the New Caledonian community. So it's been tough economic times. The disaster really of this last week with the destruction in Greater Noumea, the capital, and surrounding towns, is going to be an enormous setback with loss of jobs, with damage to public infrastructure, private businesses, and it may lead to a number of people, French nationals, just leaving the country. Why would you invest given the political uncertainty in coming months?
Now, Nic, we know that pro-independence and loyalist leaders have accepted an invitation to talks in Paris in the wake of the violence. Now, in your opinion, what's needed to restore peace and how can New Caledonia build from here?
I think there's still a level of uncertainty about whether everyone will turn up in Paris. Indeed, the independence movement FLNKS has called upon France in recent weeks to send an independent high-level delegation of dignitaries to New Caledonia to talk. There's been a breakdown of trust between the independence movement and Overseas Minister Gérald Darmanin, and indeed the President himself. And it will take some time to rebuild a level of trust that people are willing to make compromises necessary to bring together really polarised opinion between anti-independence parties and the Kanak people. What this crisis has really highlighted, though, is that there could be no political settlement without the Kanak people, without the indigenous Melanesian people of New Caledonia, who make up more than 40% of the population. There's a danger that France will try and forge its way ahead through during the state of emergency without really addressing long-standing cultural, political, social concerns of the Melanesian people, most of whom want an independent nation.
Thank you very much, Nic, for your time, and thank you for joining the Pacific.
Johns, thank you very much for hosting me.